So all right, we're recording now.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Hello, folks. All right. Welcome to the Board of Equalization and Review of Buncombe County. Thank you, board, for coming today. You don't leave.
It's beautiful.
Sorry. And for your service to the citizens of Buncombe County. I'd like to introduce everybody, Dr. Linda Weinert and Phil Blake and Katrina Leeter. Say it right.
It's Katrina Leeter, but it's
Really
it's
close.
okay.
Man.
It was close.
It was
Close
close.
though. It was.
Almost there.
Yeah. It was, I mean,
All right.
I could feel it.
So let's make sure I get this one right. Is your first name Edward or your last name Edward?
I think that.
Yeah, last name is Preston Edwards and myself, Randall Barnett. All right. The duties of the board can be found in the North Carolina General Statutes 105-322. And I now call the proceeding to order. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes from April 11th, 2025. Have we all seen those minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
I make a motion that the minutes be approved as circulated.
A second.
All right, all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 Or nay. Okay. Second order of business is to end the official appeal period that began on May 16th. No, that's it. They officially end on May 16th, 2025. All those that want to approve the appeal period to end today.
Are you making a motion? You probably need that in the form of a motion.
Form of a motion. And what time today do they end?
1 p.m.
At 1 p.m. Okay.
I make a motion that the appeal period end officially on May 16th, 2025 at 1 p.m.
So, all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay. The next thing on the agenda today is new business.
All right, this is where I give you the count of appeals. So currently there are no residential appeals.
Wow.
So we are still sending notice of the value out for recently reported damages. So those can still, we do data audits, so we can still have an appeal period. Once they receive a notice, we'll have 30 days to appeal. So we are working through those. I do anticipate a couple, but we don't have any right now. So we had a little over, probably around 120 or so, if I'm not mistaken, which is surprising because we adjusted down probably 5,000 property related damage. So, but we've been working closely.
Your office handled all that.
Yes, our residential appraisers handle all that. Our commercial staff, 2 folks, residential appraisers of 10 folks there, so they handle that whole load. So, but I would anticipate something would make it your way here in the next few months. Commercial, we have 20 properties that we're unknown right now. So there are 20 out there that have recent notices sent their way. Now, we could probably anticipate a handful of that. Business personal property, there's 1 penalty appeal, and there's 4 penalty appeals and 1 value appeal. So that's still lingering out there. They're still working through that. I would think all those will probably make it here. So we can anticipate that. And that's our current count. So 10 appeals total. Yeah. So I would think that would probably be, depending on what comes back, maybe 2 hearing regular meetings, the time frame and how long this could take.
Do we set the schedule following the final determination of numbers and then set the schedule date
Yes.
or the dates for the hearing?
Yeah, we set what day.
It's the first and third Monday is what people voted on.
So that was what was the majority voted on, first and third Monday. Was it at 3 o'clock or 1 o'clock? What is it? 1 to 3?
1 to 3.
1 to 3. So 1 to 3 in those days. So what I would ask is that you give probably 30 days from now until you hold your first one, just to give those recently noticed commercial properties some time to, so they feel we can work through it, do our due diligence, and make sure all the information.
So probably June 16th. That's the third Monday of June. So maybe that could be our first, if we're saying first and third.
Yeah.
Are you on vacation that day or anything?
I know, it's all of a sudden
No,
I know, I gotta worry about this guy.
No, actually, the first and third,
As the first hearing.
yeah, no, that
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah, first and third
Yeah,
Monday,
Father's
but just to give enough time for the June 2nd will be too early.
Yeah.
Okay. June 16th.
Because you're still having informal appeals, and some of these you may actually resolve, so they don't actually come before the board.
I wouldn't be surprised if you ended up with 1 or 2 commercial appeals and 3 business personal property. But right now, it's looking like we'll get a handful of commercial. Commercial's tough, because a lot of those are tax revenues from out of state, we don't know what they're going to get to us. So,
1 o'clock
Yes.
on the 6th.
1 to 3.
1 to 3.
All right. So we'll get that on the calendar, get it advertised, get everything ready for you all as they come in. Now, that second piece, I'll introduce it. What we put together, this is being a quasi judicial board, and our other ones do this, correct me if I'm wrong, but they all create bylaws. Because as you've read in that DOR manual, there's some considerations that we can make, that the DOR says, hey, we recommend you make a recommendation on how to handle certain cases. So that is all in those bylaws. Ann, Kurt, and I have looked through those. We benefit from having a board of adjustments. We were able to take those and kind of format them similarly, and as they deal with that.
But what we will have is also like some procedures. So for the actual hearing, we will give you all more or less kind of a script, as to who goes first. And then, so that you kind of all have a script about. No, but I'm just wanting to say that those procedures are not in the bylaws or those.
Yeah,
correct.
Gotcha.
yeah.
Separate.
And the goal with it is to make you all a new board. Everybody's fresh, everybody in here is new. So make everybody comfortable, and we'll have some standards right in front of you. You can have them with you while you're deliberating and talking with the appellants and us on what you can and should and shouldn't do. What's the ideal approach there's a decision section there, so you can down to making some decisions. And we actually, one of the things I want to point out in there is we spelled out good calls, which is something we've never done. So that takes some of that subjectivity out of it. Helps you all.
Good cause.
Oh, it's 2 sides? Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll send that in an email to you all too, a PDF.
I did notice number 12 and 14 are the exact same thing
Are they?
in here. Yeah.
Oh, okay, well, that's probably something we need to correct.
What might be a good thing for you all to do is maybe between now and the next meeting is for you to read through those. If you have any suggestions or anything like that, get those to us, and probably the first order of business that we would have before we get into the hearings on the 16th would be to adopt the bylaws and rules of procedure. We will tentatively hand those out, or if there's a party, depending on, know that ahead of time. But that's how I would envision that. So you don't have to try to digest everything right now
Yeah, so
at the spur of the moment.
yeah, so you can take it and read it, ask questions. You can email back and forth about what you're seeing there. If you have any questions, give us a call. But then, like Kurt was saying, the first item on the next regular meeting would be to vote to approve, or just even amend to it. Like, so that's one of the goals is establish it, and as we go, for the next following year, we can add to the rules.
But just, I think the main thing when you're reviewing this is making sure, I think one of the key things is that if you're putting something in writing, and this is a rule and something that we're gonna do, we need to make sure that we're consistent following that. So keep that in mind, that when you put something in writing like that people are gonna hold you to it. Because that's basically what attorneys will do, is they will pick apart your rules of procedures and things like that and say, oh, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. So just keep that in mind when you're reading that.
So after it's approved here, does it need to go to the county commissioners to be approved? Even though we're their quasi board.
Well, you are an official, you are actually a board that is created by a North Carolina general statute. The commissioners appoint you to serve on the board, but you have almost your own statutory scheme that you have to follow.
So we could do something that they don't like and they can't tell us.
It's quite hot now. Right now they may.
Where are you going?
No, your job,
You
no,
said.
and I can use the Board of Adjustment. The Board of Adjustment may render a decision that the county commissioners may not agree with. That's when they delegate that authority to you, that's something that they have to live with. But we would be, that you would be defended as your board's decision if you were ever in a dispute with the county. But you're not really directly doing anything to the county, or you and the county. They may not politically agree with what you're doing, but nonetheless, you're not actually ruling against the county. Most of your things are for taxpayers and things like that. So I don't foresee anything, but you are an independent body. And the idea is the two big things are, number one, having your rules of procedures. And then the second thing is that when you render a decision after a hearing, that you reduce that decision to writing and make sure that, all the parties get a copy of that. Those are really the two big statutory things.
Okay.
Good question, buddy. All right, and that last piece of new business is the consent agenda. So that's in the bylaws, and certain of the borders, the consent agenda. But what for us, for this board, what we will present to you all for the consent agenda will be, one, what you approved for late exemption applications during your first hearing, actually. So that'll be in the consent agenda. One of the other items, which is going to be new, is appeals. So we would send a spreadsheet of appeals before and after values to you. That'll be a work in progress. One of the things that we've discussed is actually applying the reason for the adjustment, things like that. And that's something we would have to work out in-house. So it takes some time for that, but what we can supply is the value before and after, the owner, the parcel, things like that.
But those are basically where staff and the owners have agreed to, and you're basically just needing you all to give the formal sign off.
Yeah. So other counties do that, larger counties. Some do, some don't, but we're going to step in that direction and start doing that. So that's one, and then basically we'll get the consent agenda to you beforehand. You'd have time to review it, ask questions. There's some items that are about you that you want to add. So you would have to communicate that with us, get everybody's approval to add things to the agenda and to the consent agenda. So it's all in there.
And also you should have the ability that if you disagree or something as a board, you can remove it from the consent agenda and then move it to new business and discuss it further. That's something the county commissioners do. Although, knock on wood, they normally don't pull things off the consent agenda, but they do have the ability to do that. And so would you.
In order to discuss it, it has to be pulled
Has to be pulled.
off the consent agenda.
Well, if it's something you want to dig into more, I mean, ideally the consent agenda is for things, there is there's not really a need for discussion. It's
Right.
pretty much,
Review, it's basically vote, streamline the whole process and get that through,
You
so
know,
we can
so
move
you-
on to
yeah.
hearing appeals. So,
And you said something in the meeting that we had to have read it. Does that mean we had to have read it before we could vote?
oh, the bylaws?
No, the consent agenda, it's being emailed to us.
Mhm.
We pre-read it before we come here.
Mhm.
And if we're getting ready to vote on it, if somebody honestly says, I'm sorry, I haven't read it.
Oh, yes, they can
not
motion to
vote?
remove themselves from the vote.
That's
The
what you
majority
said.
could vote to affirm that, and then they would need to vote. Yes. So
So-
if Katarina didn't vote, or didn't read the consent agenda, she could say, oh, we're gonna do
I'll read it.
No,
Fine.
No,
I'm saying you can.
but any of us could.
But there could be things that come up in life and you don't have time to get to it. So,
Right, anyone
And
could
this is the
admit.
spreadsheet that we're talking about,
Yeah,
that has all,
those
that's already
yeah,
been.
but
conditionally
but
approved.
ideally, the staff would not be putting anything that is controversial, anything that where there's a dispute or anything like that. Most of this stuff would be,
It's black and white.
yeah,
I mean, it's
so-
just clear, okay. But the agreement is that we have looked at it and digested it before
and
we.
if you
comment
have
on
it, just, recuse yourself. It's about basically one of those things
As long
where
as three of us
you don't want folks feeling like they have to vote on something that they don't have a choice. So you do have a choice.
yeah, I had that in my notes, I wanted to clarify.
Yeah. no, it sounds-
And the other thing that we wanted to point out in your rules of procedure is that you will not need to have a second. And that's something you all can decide on motions, but since it is a small board, we are proposing to get rid of the second requirement. So someone just makes a motion and then you can vote on the motion, so you don't have to do seconds for everything. However, if you have a preference, we can do seconds.
You love seconds.
No big deal. That's probably the most, the most, I guess what I'm trying to say is that's something that would affect you on a pretty regular basis. So I just wanted to highlight that so that if you had a preference one way or the other, we could make that change.
We would accidentally second
No big deal. if you do
Yeah.
several months.
Yeah.
Catch on not to do it.
It's not a huge deal, but once again, you want to do what your procedures say, or your bylaws say.
Yeah, so
If somebody makes a motion and four of us don't want that motion, and we sit here, no one seconds it, then it doesn't go, and we move on.
Well,
If it
No,
doesn't-
you
if it
can
doesn't
still
get
take the
second.
vote.
no, so like if somebody makes a
And then vote it
motion,
down.
then instead of waiting for a second, then you would vote on the motion. So either you'd approve the motion or deny the motion. Yeah, it's always very uncomfortable when someone makes a motion and then there's no second. It's like this uncomfortable, like, okay, everybody's like, well, now what do we do? You know, so then you end up doing the opposite motion.
Yes,
So it's weird. So we're trying to avoid that.
okay.
So that's all I had on the new business to discuss with y'all. So, again, that is in draft. We'll be making changes to it. Anything you all have, a suggestion or questions, just let us know. We'll get those answered for you as quickly as we can, and we'll try to get the final copy to you 48 hours before.
Well, I hope we get the bylaws, the final bylaws way before 48 hours.
Yeah, well, any changes, if anything changes, we'll get the.
And if we email you a suggestion or a question or anything, is it just between us, or can we include them in it, in the email?
Yeah, include
What I think you want to avoid is, so like a public meeting is when you're transacting the public business. So what you don't want to be doing is deliberating issues over emails. So if you want to send your suggestion and copy everybody, that's fine. But what you want to avoid doing is Glenda saying, hey, I like that, and then Phil saying, no, I don't like that. You shouldn't be having that debate. That the press will then say, well, once you start deliberating, that's a public meeting, and you should have announced that. So that's kind of the guidance I would give you all regarding the use of email and copying everybody. It's really it's good to let everybody be informed, but don't have deliberations through the email.
Next meeting's the 16th.
16th.
Okay.
Hold on.
1, 2, 3, 4, yeah.
So I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
We don't need to second.
We haven't adopted the bylaws yet.
We
I second.
All those in favor, raise your
Aye.
hand and say aye.
Aye.